Yesterday, for the first time in 7 years, lawmakers in the House of Representatives were able to propose amendments to legislation. You heard me right. First time in 7 years, legislators were actually allowed to propose amendments, and it ended up there were over 140 amendments that were offered. Tony and I have discussed on the program for the past several weeks that all of this procedural change was due to a new House rules package, which literally returns the people's house to be just that, the people's house, where your representatives are actually able to debate and discuss and offer amendments. Yes, discussion and debate.
The Republicans are giving a big wet kiss to big oil. They're making it more difficult for families to afford gas at the pump and rewarding big oil with record profits. Once again, they're demonstrating they care more about protecting the profits of big oil than protecting the wallets of hard-working Americans.
H.R. 21 is designed to stop the abuse of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for non-emergency political reasons, such as President Biden's decision to drain the SPRO in the days leading up to the election. The other side likes to say, well, it was the war in Ukraine that caused prices to go up. The war in Ukraine just exposed the energy crisis that started on day one of the Biden administration.
I love that. Actual debate and discussion happening on the House floor. That was Democrat Representative David Cicilline and Republican Representative Kathy McMorridge Rogers. And the question is this the beginning of a new era in the House of Representatives? Well, joining me now to discuss this is U.S. Representative Bob Good. He serves on the House Education and Workforce Committee and also the House Budget Committee. He represents the 5th Congressional District of Virginia. My dear friend, one of my favorite congressmen, Congressman Good, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Great to be with you, Jody. Thank you for having me again, my friend.
Well, listen, we appreciate you coming on. And look, we've discussed the necessity of a new rules package several times on this program, and I know you were one of the cornerstone members fighting for that. And yesterday, for the very first time in 7 years, we actually saw that come into play, where the modified rule enabled members just like yourself and others to actually offer amendments. In fact, 24 of them received votes, and in fact, votes that only took 2 minutes. I mean, give me your thoughts on all of this.
Well, it truly was historic to see that happen. You know, the fact that it's been 7 years, this is how it should have been all along. And you know it better than I do because you served longer than I did. And of course, you were there as a counselor and had input on this process there to the very end until you finished your last term. But it was really incredible to see, as you said, not only could we vote yes on good legislation that limits the president's ability to compromise our national economic security by selling and depleting our oil reserves for political purposes instead of strategic purposes in the national interest. But right, you had mostly Democrat amendments, quite frankly, because it was good legislation that most Republicans agreed with. And we had a handful of Republican amendments that were voted on and passed and were approved, all but I think maybe one of those. And, you know, that to slightly tweak or improve the bill. But you had a large number of Democrat bills, or excuse me, amendments that were offered, as they should be able to. You know, Congress should function in a way that protects the interests of the minority, to have some input, to have some voice, even if they don't have the numbers to pass it, of course, without persuading the majority. But that's how it should work. It takes a little bit of extra time. But as you also know, Jody, since we didn't have proxy voting, we were able to have those 2-minute votes. And so we did, in something like an hour and a half today, we had about 35 votes that we took and function as the way the founders intended. And we got good legislation that will further protect the national economic security of the country.
Well, I can't tell you how exciting that is to me. This is a battle literally that has been taking place for a long, long time. 2 questions come to mind with this. Number one, is this the beginning of a new era for the House of Representatives? Is it going to continue? And then secondly, right along with that, for those who are watching and listening right now, is there anything that they can do to help encourage this people's House to continue the way it currently is?
Well, to your first question, we certainly hope so. We hope this is the beginning of a new era. We have an opportunity for that. As you know, just over the 3 weeks ago, in the beginning of the Congress, you had historic courage on display. It hadn't happened in some 160 years, where you had members of a party force multiple votes before selecting their own member as Speaker of the House, risking their own political careers, risking their own political standing, if you will, showing the courage that we have called for in our legislators. And that allowed us to leverage that willingness to vote no on the presumptive Speaker to improve things for how Washington works, how Congress works. And really where that will show up, Jody, is when we look to the fights on the debt ceiling, the fights on the spending packages. As you know, we can't continue to do what we've always got. And that's why we do, this has to be a new era. And Kevin McCarthy is now empowered when he negotiates with the Senate, Chuck Schumer, when he negotiates with the White House, to say, hey, we cannot do things the way we've always done them because of the new rules that have been put in place in the House to constrain us from being able to pass massive spending bills. And also, I've got members in my party who mean what they say. When they say no, they mean no, and they're willing to go to the mat for that. And so he'll be empowered to have greater leverage in negotiations. And I'm pleased that Kevin McCarthy's off to a good start as Speaker. He's doing and saying the right things. We're 100% behind him, united behind him. We've turned the page on the Speaker battle, and he's empowered to lead, and we're going to be there to help him every way that we can.
This is National School Choice Week, and I wonder, you have a very important piece of legislation. But before I hit on that, just to ensure that this type of debate and discussion continues on the House floor, is there anything that our listeners can do to kind of hold their representatives or Congress in general accountable to continue this process?
Well, there's no substitute, as you know, Jody, for the age-old reach out to your member, let them know when you're happy with what they're doing, let them know when you don't agree with what they're doing. The only real voice that members of Congress hear is from constituents in their respective districts. So your listeners may have members of Congress who they agree with and are doing what they've asked them to do or what they said they would do, and so they can just encourage them when they do that, support them and encourage them. There's different ways to do that, of course. But if their member of Congress doesn't do what they said they would do or isn't taking the stand they said they would take, then they need to hear from their constituents as well, calling them, emailing them, reaching out to them, and letting them know what they want them to do. Because at the end of the day, we work for the 800,000 or so members of our respective districts.
Okay, listen, we'll do that. I want to shift real quickly, and we've only got about a minute and a half left. But this National School Choice Week, you have an extremely important bill addressing this type of issue. Tell us a little bit about what you've got.
Yeah, very quickly, you and I both, I think, agree that the federal government ought not to be involved in education. We ought to eliminate the Department of Education. The amount of dollars that are funneled from the federal government to the state and locales is not worth the mandates that come from Washington. However, what our choice bill would do is to say that the federal dollars that are allocated for each student in government schools across the country would instead follow the child, and the parent would direct where those funds would go to the educational choice that family makes, whether it's private school, Christian school, another public school outside of their district, if their state charges you when you do that, or to the homeschool educational expenses. So it really empowers parents, as particularly lower income parents, to have the resources they need to make the best education choice for their children.
Well, Congressman Bob Good, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you leading the charge on this. School choice is becoming a massively important issue these days, as we all know, as we watch what continues to take place in the public school. So thank you, Bob Good, for joining us. We appreciate your incredible leadership.
Thank you, Jody. Stay in the fight, my friend. Appreciate you.